Hello, this is Lisa Hayden with Central Kentucky TV, Community Focus on Washington County. Today, our guest is Father Ben Brown.
Hi, Lisa.
Welcome, Father.
Thank you so much. Right.
Well, I just have to say that I'm sorry to see you go, but I look forward to seeing you again.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Should we talk about why I'm going?
Well, I want to hear why you're going. And
okay.
You've been here at Holy Rosary Church, and
why don't I?
Yeah, you go ahead and tell me.
Yeah, I came in the summer of 2010.
Yeah.
I'd been home from active duty in the military for about 5-6 months at that point, and I came to be chaplain at St. Catherine College and an adjunct, that is a part-time instructor. And I was also assigned by the Archdiocese of Louisville to be the priest for Holy Rosary Church on Rosary Heights Avenue in Springfield. And so that was what brought me to Washington County. Was no stranger to Washington County, particularly because I've been a priest of the Archdiocese of Louisville since 1974. And so even though I was away in the military, I certainly knew the area. In fact, I served in Kentucky 20 years before I went to service. But anyway, 2009, in July, I came to those jobs: St. Catherine chaplain, St. Catherine instructor, and Holy Rosary's priest. And that whole relationship pretty much stayed the same until about the end of 2013, at which time I stopped being chaplain at the college, continued to be an instructor part-time, and also began to do some part-time work at the Veterans Administration hospitals, first in Dayton, Ohio, and then in Lexington. And I commuted to both those places. And now we come to the 6-year mark. And the 6-year mark is when, by policy, priests of the Archdiocese of Louisville kind of do an evaluation, look at things, and see if it's time for a change. Sometimes they renew for 6 more. But in my particular case right now, I will turn 70 in about 18 months. And so that's another interval where priests look at how they're going to spend the retirement years. So I've talked a little bit. You want to talk some more? And that give you a little bit of an idea about how I came. And
well, let's go back to you were born and raised in Louisville.
I was, yeah.
And then you decided to enter the priesthood?
I did. I went to what we call in those days, this would be 1961, a preparatory seminary. It was located in the east end of Louisville, east end of Jefferson County, on Brownsboro Road. In fact, it was called St. Thomas Seminary, and there were any number of Washington, Marion, Nelson Countyans there who were my schoolmates and even classmates and close friends. So that was high school and 2 years of college. And then I was assigned to the seminary in Indiana, which we call St. Meinrad Seminary and School of Theology. It's run by the Benedictine monks. And I did 2 more years of college there and 4 years of graduate school and became a priest in 1974.
And then, is that when you started your military chaplain career?
Not at all. No, I had no thought of the military at that point. Let's see, we can do that fairly quickly. 2 years, I was assigned in 1974 to St. James Church in Elizabethtown, and at the 2-year mark of that assignment as a junior or assistant pastor, also some people call it youth pastor, because I did a lot of work with the youth program. But 2 years into that, I was asked to become director of seminary students. So basically I was the recruiter and mentor for people who were studying for the priesthood. And while I stayed in residence at St. James, my work took me away to seminaries around the country, and I actually maintained an office in Louisville. And then that job came to an end in 1982. Archbishop Thomas Kelly had come to the diocese, and he interviewed all of his department heads, and that would be, the director of seminary students would be a department head. and he said, okay, you've been at it 6 years, let's have somebody else do that job. And so they picked another priest to do that. And then I became pastor at St. Thomas in Bardstown. So I served there. I like to joke about it a little bit. I squeezed 11 years out of a mandatory 10 because policy in those days was 10 years. And as a matter of fact, at about the 8-year mark, and this is more to your question, there was a need for a priest at the Navy Reserve Center in Louisville. And so I was volunteering to do that, and then they recruited me to be a chaplain. And so I was in the Navy Reserves for about 3 years, then went on active duty in 1993. And so then actually was sworn into the military in 1990, so I completed nearly 20 years by the end of 2009. So there's a little overlapping in there that I can imagine may be a little confusing, but the last 3 years that I served in Kentucky, 1990 to 93, I was in the reserves.
Okay.
And in fact was called to some active duty then. I did 6 months, for example, in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, while I was still pastor at St. Thomas. And so anyway, at the end of my time at St. Thomas, which would have been the summer of 1993, then I went on to active duty. And I was on active duty then from 1993 to the end of 2009.
So you were actually a part of the military, so do you have a rank and all that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I was brought into the military as what the Navy calls a lieutenant. Now that's a bit of an advanced placement because I was bringing 20 years civilian experience into that. So I was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Navy. People that know Air Force, Army, Marine Corps ranks would call that a captain. It's level 3 officer, what we call an O3, so it's commissioned officer. During the time I was in service, as you get more seniority and have more experiences, then you also get more rank. So I ended up, when it was time to leave the service, as an O5, and the Navy calls that a commander. The other branches call it lieutenant colonel.
Okay. So during that time, you were stationed around the world?
Yeah. Want me to run
Got
through
to
them
see
pretty
the
quickly?
world? Yeah, I want to
Well,
hear
I can
about
do that. My first tour of duty was with the Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton, California. In fact, there's a cute story about that, really. First of all, you need to understand that the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard get their chaplains from the Navy. So a person who is commissioned as a Navy chaplain may be expected to serve with the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard also. They're sister services. We call them the sea services, because they use ships, I guess. But anyway, what was comical was that I was asked for my first assignment to go to the 1st Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, California. And then I was assigned to something called the artillery unit. Now, the artillery is the long-range guns, okay? Where do they train for the artillery? Well, they train in the Mojave Desert if they're in California. And so anyway, I wrote my first letter home from the Mojave Desert. And so folks back in Kentucky were saying, well, that's one loco priest who's gone to the Navy and he finds himself in the desert. They don't have ships in the desert, Father Ben. What's up with that? So, but anyway, that's how that occurred. So I ended up serving at Camp Pendleton for a total of 6 years. It was 2 tours of duty. And one was with this 1st Marine Division. You talked about going globally. I went with them to Jordan and Kuwait. This would have been now in 95, on board ships and, traveling to through the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and then on land into Jordan and Kuwait. And that was really, I guess, my first time in what we call a combat zone. Let's see. There was 3 years when I worked at the Camp Pendleton Hospital, so that was pretty much a stay-at-home job. I also was asked to do some graduate school during that time, and so the Navy paid for me to get a doctorate in counseling. And so that takes us 93 to 99. 99, I go for a 2-year stint in Alaska, serving with the Coast Guard on, you probably know the island chain, the Aleutian Islands, they call it, off of Alaska. It looks like a tail. Well, the first one, the biggest one, is Kodiak Island, and it is America's largest Coast Guard station. A lot of search and rescue, a lot of work with the environment, natural resources, and so on. But we have a major base there with 1,000 Coast Guardians, and I served there as chaplain from 99 to 01. And then in 2001, this was kind of interesting. I was in part of an exchange program where the Navy would send a chaplain to the United Kingdom, to England, and then the British Navy would send a chaplain to the States. So I was assigned to a Marine Corps unit in the summer, in July of 2001, and then, of course, we know what happened in September. And within...
So were you in Britain at that time?
I was in Britain, and within 10 days I was in the Middle East. So I got to the Middle East with what's called the Royal Marine. What was our unit called? I think it was called, yes, it was called 3 Commando Brigade. But anyway, they were sent to the Middle East, and I went along as their chaplain. And sure enough, was there within about 10 days of the attacks. So that would be then the second.
So you were on active duty during that time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, and 93 to 09.
Yeah.
You know, so if you want to look at it in terms of, you know, military history periods, it would be the post-Persian Gulf War or Southwest Asia campaign, and then the global war on terrorism, and we'll come to the Iraqi freedom campaign, you know, when I kind of finish this up.
Well,
if you want me to.
Yeah, I do.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, well, 2003, I came home from England and was assigned again to the American Marines, this time on the East Coast, with something called the 2nd Marine Division. And I was assigned to a unit known as the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit. And it was right after the 4th of July. Yeah, we left on the 6th of July to go to Iraq, and that would have been in 2004. So I was in Iraq from 2004 to 2005. Okay, so that would be then the 3rd combat tour of the Middle East. Came back from Iraq and continued to serve at Camp Lejeune for a while, and my specific job was the notification to next of kin and care of the wounded warriors as they came back from the battlefield. And so that takes us up to 2006. 2006, I went to a Navy unit finally. It was something called the USS Baton, and that's we call it an amphibious assault vehicle. It's a great big old ship, 2 football fields consecutive in length. The flight deck is about 60 feet above the water. Carries about 2,000 sailors and about that many more Marines. It's just the boat that you see in the movies where the front end opens up and the little boats come out and the Marines go ashore. So anyway, USS Baton. 2000, it would have been, got there in 6. 2007, we went out on another one of those floats, we call them. It's basically sending the hardware, you know, to where it's positioned for whatever the need may be. And again, ours was to the Middle East. So that was sort of summarizing the combat tours. 2 of them were on land with Marines, and 2 of them were on ships. Let me see.
Gosh, it sure sounds like you were in a lot of dangerous situations.
Pretty regularly, yeah. At least in those combat tours, you know.
Yeah.
But just to sort of conclude the career part, you might say, I got back, let me see, it's been a little while since I've been over this. In 2008, I finished my tour of duty with the ship, USS Bataan, and then went to an island in the Mediterranean. It's the island of Crete in Greece, and it's a very strategic place for us because it has a very deep port. It's the deepest port in the Mediterranean. That means the great big carriers, 3 football fields, the nuclear carriers, can come in all the way to the pier, whereas in many other places they have to anchor out and then come in on smaller boats. But anyway, the U.S. Navy support activity is a Navy base on this island, and basically what it's used for, and the reason why they would want a chaplain and a priest there, is that people going into Iraq and Afghanistan and coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan would stop there. People who remember the Vietnam War remember that we used Hawaii for the same thing, what we called R&R, but people would go into Hawaii, then to Vietnam, out of Vietnam, back to Hawaii. We do the same thing with Crete for Iraq and Afghanistan. So I was there then from for all of 08 and 09. And in 09,
Doing
I came home.
counseling and
Very much so, yeah.
chaplain
Yeah,
work.
that's right. You picked right up on it, Lisa. They wanted somebody with the counseling background and with the combat background, so that the young sailor Marine who's going into combat, can talk about their anxieties with somebody who's been to combat, and same way with those coming back. So then in the end of 09, I hit a magic age of 62. And at 62, generally, if you're a commissioned officer, then you need to, according to law, you finished your time in service. And I came home. So
Well, I'm glad you came home.
Well, thank you. I am too.
I'm glad were able to get here.
Yeah, I'm glad
What
to
a
be home.
career! My
Yeah.
goodness,
Pretty active.
it really, really was. And I'm sure you could tell a whole lot of stories about those times.
Oh yeah, and have.
Yeah.
Told stories.
And then, and you got to see a lot of the world too.
Oh yeah, sure.
So,
I think I've
what a
been-
career!
I know I've been across the Atlantic, either by air or ship, 38 times. And I've been across the Pacific by ship or air 10 times. And I think I've been in 36 countries. I haven't counted them up for a while, and some of that was pure recreation. I have as a hobby, I like to scuba dive. And long before I went in the service, I went to the Caribbean on scuba diving trips. I went to the Pacific on scuba diving trips.
Wow.
So anyway, I've been
Where
around.
did you learn to scuba dive if you were from Louisville?
Oh, that's exactly where I learned, was Louisville.
Oh, really?
Oh, there are a couple of dive shops in Louisville where you can,
I have heard there, yeah, that they had so you just picked that up as a hobby.
yeah.
When,
And there's a
and
little.
you still scuba dive?
Yeah, I do. I just had my certification freshened up about 2 months ago. Yeah. One of the places, we have in Kentucky, as you know, the lakes and recreation is such an important industry. As a matter of fact, I saw a fascinating statistic not long ago. Kentucky has more miles of shoreline than Florida
I knew that.
because of the lakes and the rivers.
Right.
So you take the really deep and clear lakes like Harrington, certainly Dale Hollow and Lake Cumberland. You can do some diving there. Now I must confess, as I age, I like warmer water. So.
Do you go to the ocean and scuba dive quite a bit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you be careful with those sharks and things.
Oh gosh, that's what makes it interesting.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what makes it
Well,
interesting.
do you have any comment or any story that you would like to tell about all those years during your time in the service?
In the service? Gosh, I don't know. Any particular story, particular memory? People ask that a lot. How does ministry differ, from the parish, to the military? And sure, the context is a bit different, you know. All right, let me tell you this story. You know, everybody knows that we have shorter and shorter supply of priests in the area. So on any given Sunday, local priests may do 2 or even 3 masses, okay? Well, I will never forget Christmas Eve, Christmas Day of 2004, because I celebrated Mass and 2 baptisms in 7 different locations. Now, I had a helicopter, okay, so I was going mostly by helicopter, you know, and in the course of the morning of Christmas Eve to about noon of Christmas Day, I'd gone to 7 different locations celebrating Mass, and sure enough, 2 times, you know, guys wanted to be baptized. Now, again, that's going to look rather different, you know, because it's a combat setting,
Right.
than it would at St. Rose, Holy Trinity, Holy Rosary, St. Dominic. For example, and people enjoy this, seem to enjoy me telling it a lot. I baptized, all told, 11 different sailors and Marines while I was in that combat tour of Iraq. But there weren't any white robes, you know, which is what you often use in baptism. I mean, these Marines and sailors were in combat, full combat dress, flak jacket, you know, they would have had their weapons on them and so on. And what I would typically do is take off their hard hat, their helmet, okay, and they would lean over it, and I would take their canteen. Now, we had some, you know, preliminary prayers, and that's how I would baptize them. I'd pour that canteen of water over their head, and, you know, no less profound, no less religious, you know, no less a sacrament, you know, than it would have been if it was in a cathedral someplace.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, the setting is different. You know, the the instructions that you typically spend about 16 weeks on in a parish, what we call the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults, you know, that's a class, you know, that unfolds over several weeks. You're not going to do that in the combat zone. You know,
I don't think so.
You do have, you know, sometimes quite a bit of time, you know, to talk to an individual. On ships, it was often the case that somebody had the night watch. Well, that can be the most boring thing in the world if you're sitting there, you know, up on the flight deck of a ship at sea and you're looking out into darkness. Oh, it's fascinating to see all the stars, and, you know, you have views that you wouldn't see when you're around ambient light and around cities and so on. But it's a long stretch, you know, and the chaplain can have some really good conversations, you know, with people who are very much in their formative years, you know. So, yeah, I mean, where as a local priest, I might make appointments with people or perhaps call on them when they're hospitalized or something like that. It's a different setting.
Right.
Often talking about the same things. I mean, any number of times, young Marine or sailor would say, "Chaplain, I'm planning to get married when this tour of duty is over, you know, and my fiance is getting her instruction from her priest back home. Can you do my instruction for me out here?" And would do that, you know. So again, the ministry as a priest or a chaplain, you know, is fundamental. It's driven by, you know, the human situation and faith, and wherever that plays out, whether it be in military uniform or, you know, in the parish, you know, there's a common denominator, even though it's in a different setting.
Well, you've certainly had some different experiences, probably more so than you know, some priests. So, you know.
Well, of course, you know, if I can just interrupt for a second, since we're in Springfield, I mean, a lot of folks will remember Leon Spalding. Father Leon Spalding had a 20-year career as an Army chaplain.
Right.
And Father Pat Dolan, who served at St. Dominic's.
Right.
And
right.
Holy Rosary, by the way.
That's right.
Had
right.
had a long career.
That's right.
Primarily with the National Guard for Father Pat. But yeah, you know,
That's
so
right, yeah.
so and I'm confident that many in the Protestant community have served as chaplains too. I just don't know their stories as well. But
So now you've come full circle. Because you're going back over to Hardin County.
that's right. Yeah, that's exactly
Where
right.
you started out.
Well, you know, in more ways than one. You're right. From our conversation, I was a brand new priest there in June of 1974 in the county seat, St. James. Now, what we haven't talked about and would not have needed to is that my father was born in Hardin County. He and his parents and his 13 siblings lived in a little community called St. John. I call it a suburb of Rineyville.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and so, you know, when I was a kid growing up in Louisville, when we went out to the farm, we were going out to, you know, Daddy's parents' place, you know.
Okay.
And so that was Hardin County. And again, the specific community that I'm moving to, Cecilia, is about 10 miles from where Daddy grew up on the farm. And again, very close proximity to where my grandparents have their graves and where my grave will be. So it's coming back. Well, remember the old John Denver song, Coming Home to a Place He'd Never Been Before? Well, I didn't grow up there, but in a real sense, I'm coming home.
Yeah. Is St. John still a community there? Do they still call it St. John?
If you're from there, you do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Most people say Rineyville, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm familiar with Rineyville, but I
Uh-huh.
never heard of St. John before.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Well, what its claim to fame is a place called Bethlehem Academy. Now, folks in this area know about Bethlehem Academy in Bardstown, which the Sisters of Charity started, you know, decades ago.
Right.
Well, the Sisters of Loretto started the Bethlehem Academy in the St. John community, and that building is still there. Now, that school was run by Sisters of Loretto from 1829 to 1951. So it's not been a school for a lot of years, but the building's still there.
Did they have a restaurant and antique store or something in that for a while?
Here's what you're thinking of.
Okay.
A few, probably 20, 25 years ago, somebody bought it because they wanted to restore it. And they did that. And it was used as a reception place. I remember going to a wedding reception there.
Okay.
You know, so they could prepare a meal there or have it catered or what have you. Now, I must confess, you know, how that, you know, the deteriorated or the demise of that establishment, that happened while I was away. So I'm not familiar with it. I am, as a matter of fact, going to be pastoring the fellow who now owns the building. And he's still formulating his plans for, you know, what he's going to do with it.
Okay.
Mhm.
So there's nothing in it right now then?
No, that's correct.
Okay. So then you now then will be the pastor of, no, you won't be pastor. You're going to be working at St. James though, doing some work there?
Have nothing to do with St. James, really.
Okay.
Now St. James, let me just kind of give
Okay.
you that setup. For yes, the last several years, St. James has been responsible for St. Ambrose in Cecilia and St. Ignatius at White Mills.
Okay.
Nick, who did the nice article in the Springfield Sun that came out today, identified it as St. Agnes. It's St. Ignatius, and I guess I just wasn't clear in talking to him. But anyway, St. Ignatius is at a place called White Mills. White Mills, here I go with that term again, it's a suburb of Sonora.
Okay.
So people know Sonora on the interstate,
Yeah.
and the beautiful community of White Mills is where St. Ignatius is.
Okay.
St. Ambrose is just off Highway 62. That's the road between Elizabethtown and Litchfield. We know it as the road between Bloomfield and Bardstown, or Bardstown to Boston. But anyway, so 6 miles south of Elizabethtown, just off 62, is Cecilia. And that's where St. Ambrose is. Now, with the new appointments, St. Ambrose and St. Ignatius are a separate entity from St. James. And I'm coming in to be their priest administrator. Now,
For St. Ambrose
and St.
and
Ignatius.
St. Ignatius.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I will reside at St. Ambrose, but our schedule every Sunday is an 8 o'clock Mass there and a 10 o'clock Mass at St. Ignatius. So I'll serve both of those parishes. The title, administrator, I like pastoral administrator, but there's a little bit of a distinction between pastor and administrator with regard to policy. For example, tenure, the number of years that you would have in service at a particular place. And we want to keep that flexible because I turned 70 next year. And so at 70, which is the retirement age for priests in this area, we want to have the option to renew on a
yearly basis?
Yearly basis is the policy.
Okay.
So that's easier to do if you're administrator than if you're pastor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because pastor would be for like 10 years. Right?
Well,
Or
you must stop being pastor at 70.
Oh,
See,
okay.
so 70 is only
So that's
18
not-
months away.
Right.
Why face that issue by naming me pastor now? Let's just name me administrator, and then when 70 happens, the automatic renewal thing can kick in.
Okay.
Whereas that wouldn't be so easy if I were named pastor.
Right.
Again, a little bit of a technicality there, but again, I will reside there and make my home at St. Ambrose, and then let me maybe spin off of that just a touch, because it's kind of ironic. On the 11th of November last fall, which of course is Veterans Day, I had an appointment with Archbishop Kurtz. He always likes to be in touch with the priests and so on, and we hadn't sat down together for probably 3 years at that point. And so he said, yeah, come on in, tell me what's going on. So I made him aware of the nursing home that's being developed for veterans in Radcliffe. It's under the auspices of the State Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA, I mentioned that earlier, but the VA hospitals are under the federal government, and state government, again, KDVA, Kentucky Department of Veterans Administration, has 4 of these nursing homes, one over in the west, one in the east, one at Wilmore,
Right.
okay, and then this new one that hasn't actually even opened yet. So in November, I asked the Archbishop for permission to apply to be their chaplain, and he encouraged that, and I pointed out, I said, you don't have to have had military experience to be chaplain to veterans, but it's a help, and I found that from working at the hospitals. So he encouraged me, but he said, we also need you to do parish work. Why don't we look at this situation in Hardin County? And so I will go in, as I said, to reside at St. Ambrose. That's about 15 minutes from the nursing home in Radcliffe. They haven't posted the job yet. They will, we think, probably in August. And so I may or may not get that job. But anyway, I'll be close by if I do.
Yeah.
So.
We need to talk to Heather French Henry about that.
Actually, the Deputy Commissioner French Henry and I have had several conversations. Yeah.
Good.
The most recent one just a week ago.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, you'd be excellent at that position, wouldn't you?
That's kind of
It's right up your alley.
Well,
so.
Again, there's a bit of a rapport, seriously, when you're talking to veterans, and a veteran starts talking and using some of the jargon, like battalion or platoon or, combat zone or landing zone or, flight deck and what have you. They like the fact that you know the language, you can talk the talk a bit, and that makes it a little easier for them to whether it's reminiscing or dialoguing or getting heavy stuff off their minds,
Right.
Yeah, they like that you can relate to them.
I found that when I interviewed some veterans last year on this program on Channel 6, that in talking with them, they really did not communicate too much with me. But when they got to talking with each other off the air, my goodness, they just, went on and on and on.
Yeah.
I said, I wish I'd gotten that part on film.
Yeah.
But, you know, they were comfortable with each other and
Yeah.
they could relate and
That's really
tell
true.
stories. And, you know, it is. It's just very
My brother
true.
tells a great story, and it's touching in many ways, and it's really insightful. But he visited the Vietnam Wall. You know, they have a traveling wall. In fact, it's in Hardensburg in Breckinridge County later this month. It's been in Lexington. It's been in Bardstown. But anyway, my brother Sam, who's a two-tour Vietnam combat veteran and was a POW in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
So he is a seasoned veteran. But anyway, what was interesting is that he was at the wall, okay, and he started started up a conversation with another fellow. What unit were you in, and where were you, and so on and so forth, and they chatted quite a bit. And directly this stranger's wife came over to my brother and said, he's talked more to you in 15 minutes than he has to me in 15 years. And it illustrates a number of things, like what you're saying. There's that instant rapport.
Right.
So
That's exactly right.
the veteran gets frustrated sometimes when he has to stop and, explain technical language.
Well, so when do you start this new position?
A week from today.
Okay.
The 22nd.
Yeah. But now you've indicated that you will come back when you're needed here. You've told Father Kevin McGrath that at Holy Rosary or St. Rose.
Sure.
That you'll
a number of ties to Washington County. One of the most, for me, enjoyable things I've done in the last 6 years is I like to call it hiding in the baritone section of the Mid-Kentucky Chorus. And so, I've spent my Tuesdays at rehearsals when I could, and participated in several of the concert series. And if
so you hope to be able to continue to do
if
that?
Maestro Tedder will have me, I'll be happy to do that. And any number of things will, bring me back to Washington County. You're absolutely right. Father Kevin, has a busy schedule with 2 parishes. And again, I don't have any commitments Saturday night or Sunday in terms of liturgy and worship. So he's indicated that he wants to call him in. Similarly with the new priest at St. Thomas in Bardstown. He has a Sunday night and a Saturday night Mass. And so he's asked me to take on some of those. So
Were you ever over at St. Joe?
No.
Okay.
No, never worked at
St.
St.
Thomas,
Joseph,
okay.
but St. Thomas, 11 years.
Okay.
So no, I know the way back and forth, and as I've said to folks too, I hope they, can come visit me when they come to Hardin County.
Right. And then of course, you said my daughter's wedding, which was very helpful to us at the time, and in your military uniform, and not as a but at any rate you can I suppose come back here and assist with at weddings at the parishes or baptisms and things when the priests are shorthanded.
It's just very courteous. I mean, it's a matter of courtesy that the local priest makes the call.
Yeah.
So when somebody asks me, Father, can you participate in our wedding? Can you participate in our baptism? What have you? Then I typically say, as long as that's okay with your pastor. So
Yeah.
you talk to the pastor about that and
Yeah.
so on. So yeah, whatever.
And I wish that you were still going to be able to be, at St. Catherine, of course, we've all been praying on that,
Oh, sure.
that
Terribly
something
sad.
happens there.
Yeah, I have my particular hope, and haven't been particularly quiet about it either. But I just think one of the strongest programs that St. Catherine has had, and in my observation, it hasn't gotten a whole lot of publicity. I was at the Washington County High School graduation this year, and was very impressed with all the awards and accolades the students had. There was not one mention made, either in print or vocally, of the fact that 5 of those students as they picked up their high school diplomas at 8 o'clock at night, had earlier in the day received an associate degree at St. Catherine. They were wearing the academic hood appropriate to the associate degree. And that wasn't the first time. If I'm not mistaken, Washington County had 10 such graduates last year. And again, because of snow days and what have you, they got their college diploma, 2-year degree, before they got out of high school, literally. And I think it's
Isn't that
sensational.
amazing? It's
and
wonderful.
It's completely in touch with what President Obama has suggested would be a great legacy, and that is free college education, 2 years for every American, you know, and state of Tennessee has already started that policy. So St. Catherine in 1931 started as a junior college, stayed a junior college up until, what was it, 1996, I think.
Yep.
And if it became a junior college again, particularly as a feeder and in cooperation with 4 other Catholic colleges in the state, you have Thomas More in northern Kentucky, Brescia in western Kentucky, Spalding and Bellarmine in Louisville, you know, St. Catherine could become a 2-year institution, you know, be a strong junior college, perhaps with the supervision of one or other of those schools. You know, I just think it would be a good fit.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
And what has been done at Washington County could surely be done at the Marion counties and at the Nelson counties and the Thomas Nelsons and the Bethlehems and so on.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. We'll work on that, Father.
You heard it.
And we'll pray on that too.
You heard it first on Lisa's program.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, I just want to wish you well in your new position, and I hope you get that job at the new Veterans Center. I think that's going to be a wonderful thing, having that Veterans Center there.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's going to be very well received. Just 2 more quick personal things. One of the things I'd like to do in retirement is write. I've got a lot of books. I do a lot of reading. Did a program called the Master of Arts in Spirituality over the last 2 years at Bellarmine. You know, so I would very much like to have the job at the nursing home. But if I don't get it, I have other things to do. And here's the cute part of this. In the particular residence that I have at St. Ambrose in Cecilia, there is what looks like the remnants of probably a clothesline, one of those T-pipes, you know. There's one of them there, and I discovered it, you know. And one day I said to the congregation, you know, if there were another one of those in the backyard, I could hang a hammock from it. So some fellow came over and he said, Father, where do you want to put your hammock? And so the rest of that story is, if I don't get the job at the nursing home, I'll spend more time in the hammock.
And devote more time to your writing.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you deserve it. You've certainly been a busy person the last 50 years. So I want to wish you well, and I know our viewing audience wishes you well. And we just want to make sure that we also get to continue to see you.
You betcha.
And either over in Hardin County or in Washington County.
Amen. I'll be around.
Amen.
All right.
Thanks, Father.
Okay, my dear. God bless you.